This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show. And our Moonlighter for this week is a guy that if you heard his name, you're probably like, where do I know that name from? Or if you see his face, you're like, man, I recognize that face from somewhere. Where is it that I've seen that guy before? So our Moonlighter is a guy by the name of Steve Javie. And Steve Javie was an NBA official from 1986 to 2011. And today, if you watch the NBA over the weekends, he's the guy that ESPN cuts to every time there's a replay review. They go to Steve Javie to interpret the rule. So Steve, he was essentially, one of the NBA's most prominent officials throughout the whole Jordan era. So he went from 86 to 2011. So that's basically, Michael Jordan's entire career there. So I was really excited to get him on the podcast because it's almost like getting the Joe West of basketball onto the pod, right? This guy had so many stories, so many great eras that his career covered. He did LeBron's games, MJ's games. He came in right at the end of Dr. J's career. So I wanted to get him on the podcast, especially because he still plays a prominent role with those replays today. But the reason that Javie kind of came onto my radar was I heard about a year ago that Steve Javie is a deacon in the Catholic Church. This guy's a clergyman in the Catholic Church. And as many of you well know, I am a practicing Catholic, and I thought it would be so interesting to talk to Steve Javie not only about his officiating career, which we do, but I also wanted to see what made him want to be a deacon in the Catholic Church, and he has recently become ordained within the last decade here, and I wanted to get that part of his story as well, because as you know, we've done some of this on the podcast. We've had multiple priests on the podcast. We've talked a little bit about my faith before. So I thought Steve would be a perfect guy to come onto the pod to have that intersection between faith and sports that has been kind of the formula of a couple of our episodes that we've had here on the podcast. And it's also really great to talk to a guy that's, on the court through some of the most famous NBA games of my lifetime. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one. So special thanks to Steve Javie for coming on. As always, special thanks to our sponsor, the People's Company as well. Matty Adams, the great People's Company land broker and farm management guy. He got married this past weekend. So if you see Matt Adams around, tell him congratulations. He now has a golden ring on his left hand. So congratulations to Matt Adams and his beautiful wife, Rochelle. Andrew Zellmer was a fellow usher in the wedding with me. We just tore it up. It was probably the most well-orchestrated wedding from an usher standpoint as I've ever been involved in. So special thanks to the guys over at People's Company. Enjoy today's episode with Steve Javie, the NBA ref, and the Catholic deacon. But before we get to our interview, Moonlighters, are you or someone you know moving down to Kansas City? Well, if you are, the one realtor that we trust and that you need to be calling is the great Brian Sandvig. As you well know, Brian Sandvig is our producer here on the podcast, and there is not a better residential real estate advisor down in the Kansas City marketplace than Brian Sandvig. Call Brian Sandvig, shoot him a text. Hey, DM us on social media. We'll get you connected with Brian if you can't find him on all the socials, but he is there and he is active, and he is your Kansas City realtor, so give him a call. All right, Steve Javie, I just saw you on my TV yesterday as I was watching the NBA playoffs, but welcome to the Moonlight Graham Show.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Steve, where I want to start with you is back before your basketball officiating days, you were a baseball player. You were, born and raised in Philadelphia, played baseball at Temple, and then you end up playing in the Baltimore Orioles organization as a pitcher. What type of pitcher were you?
Well, I just had one pitch. It was a fastball, and I just tried to throw it by everybody. Obviously, it didn't work. But I just Temple University. You mentioned that Temple now unfortunately does not have a baseball team, but I will brag about them a little. Back in the '70s, and I think it was before everybody was recruited up north to go down south to play. That there were certain schools in the northeast part of the country which are really known for baseball. Temple was one. St. John's was another. Maine, believe it or not, was another one. I mean, Sam, Delaware was always good. I always like to say the effect I had on Temple University baseball the year before I got to Temple, they went and competed in the College World Series. The year after I left, they went to the College World Series. So that's the effect I had on my college baseball team.
Yeah, I've seen the Maine Bears were in the College World Series, in the 70s and 80s. I've seen that before, and I've always thought it was interesting. But, still to this day, you have a lot of really good small college baseball. I mean, Stony Brook from a couple of years ago made it all the way to Omaha. So we still see a lot of good baseball. So you had the fastball. Did you throw hard?
You know what? Back then, they really didn't have too many guns shooting or something like that. And somebody would always ask, how hard did you throw and all? I really don't know. I would probably think maybe in the high 80s back then or something like that. But you know what? It was back then too, Tim. I never really had somebody to school me or coach me in pitching and the mechanics. Where it's such a science now. It's incredible. And back then, I just got the ball and just try to throw it over the plate and throw strikes. A lot of times, I walked a lot of guys, hit some guys. But I was a competitor. And luckily made it through, 4 years of baseball in college and had the opportunity to be in the minor leagues, which is a great experience.
So you get out of minor league baseball and you go right into umpiring baseball. And you were a minor league baseball umpire in the Florida State League, Class A baseball back in the day. I know that your dad was an official, your godfather was official. You have a lot of officials come out of the Philadelphia area. What is it about Philly that produces refs and umpires and officials?
I just think we're sports junkies around here, man. We live, die, and eat, the Eagles and the Phillies and the Sixers and the Flyers. So you just have a lot of people who are involved in sports. But I also believe that basketball-wise, too, is the fact that a lot of the professional players and so on in the northeast part of the country always seem to be a hotbed for players. Whether you had the Baker League, the Rucker League, and the New York Leagues up there. And so guys would officiate these great players in the summer leagues, and you become a better official by officiating better players, without a doubt. But so I think that's probably, the reason why so many officials come from the Philadelphia area.
When you're either umping baseball back in the day or you're an NBA official doing a CBA game, you're doing some of those Baker League games, and you're in Philadelphia as a Philadelphia guy, it's almost like the legend is that Philly is almost tougher on their own than they are on others. As a ref, did you feel that when you were in Philly and you're doing a game there?
One thing about Philly, I say Philly, New York also, these towns, these cities that really know, a lot about their sports. And they're really, like basketball. I mean, Philly's just a basketball town with the Big Five, obviously the Sixers, and years ago the Warriors, before it became the Sixers. They're tough on their referees and so on, but I think they're tougher on the players. I mean, they understand when players are giving 100%. They understand when players are not doing what they should be doing, and they boo the players. So I think the intelligence level of the northeast part of the country with regard to sports is very high. You go to somewhere else, and I don't mean to bemoan these certain.
Yeah, what are you saying about Iowa? What are you saying about Iowa?
Iowa, Utah, Portland, Oregon. This is the only team they have, like the Trailblazers or the Jazz. And it's like they live and die with these players. And they just, so they could be up 20 points with 10 seconds left in the game. They would have killed the referee. It doesn't matter. Where in Philly, New York, they know when the players really stunk it up, like the Sixers just did in the last couple of games. They don't care about the referees. They're yelling at the players more than anything. Funny story too, Tim. When I was refereeing and the Sixers were in the finals, and this probably goes against what I just said. Where the Sixers were in the finals with Iverson in the early 2000s, and I remember having a game in Philadelphia during the finals, which is really difficult because it's so unusual. Your routine gets thrown off like crazy because you're used to being on the road. You're used to a certain time you nap and you eat and so on and so forth. And now you're home. It's kind of crazy. But I remember going to the game, and it was like, one of the playoff games and probably one of the finals games, I said. And, the fans are all excited. They're all hyped up. And you go on the court, and like so many people think they know you. Hey, Javie, what's going on? Well, 2 or 3 minutes into the game, all the pleasantries change to like, what the heck kind of call is that? And then all the expletives and name calling and so on. So it's funny. You're right. The referee isn't noticed in his hometown. isn't accepted, I should say, in his hometown.
So you did baseball for a handful of years, and then of course you do about 35 years as an NBA official, but did some CBA before that. Is there a different line when you're tossing somebody in the NBA or a basketball game as opposed to a baseball game? Or is, if a player, no matter what sport, says something specific, they're gone no matter what?
Yeah, Tim, I think that there is a certain specific thing. If a player says something very derogatory and very personal, regardless whether it's basketball or baseball, he should be ejected. Basketball, you have like the safety net of the first technical foul, basically like a warning saying, hey, you keep this up and you will be ejected. Where baseball, it's just so cut and dry. It's like, boom, once you cross the line. The thing in baseball, they do allow the cursing as you're arguing, like when the umpire and the manager are arguing, but as long as it's not personal. They can talk about the call you just made. They can say this, that. Where in basketball, we don't even allow, they shouldn't allow any kind of, cursing but even if they're just describing the call you just made. And I guess the reason being is the fact, like I said, you get 2 technical fouls. Obviously, you can be ejected on 1 in basketball, but you do have like a little warning period. You're like, okay, that's enough. You can't talk to me that way. Baseball, you can talk to them any way you want, as long as you don't put the word "you" in it. Like you're this or you're that. They can continue on. That's why some of those. Some guys on like TikTok and all that stuff will send me some of these old time rhubarb of the umpires and the managers. And like one was just really recently with Jerry Crawford and Don Zimmer. And it was great. Jerry Crawford looked like he had a little smirk on his face, like he was loving this, that kind of stuff. And then the old ones with Earl Weaver.
Yeah.
There's some classic ones there. They really are.
I'm the same way. I love going back and watching those. And it's amazing how good those umpires, especially in baseball, are good at diffusing the situation or just kind of letting it fall off them like rainwater, right? Oh, Earl. Oh, shut up, Earl. Get back in the duck, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know. And it's funny. Obviously being an old umpire myself, but I just sent them because so many people before replay review. Now, I guess you still get the balls and strikes that they get ejected on, but on plays at the bases, you got to be kind of like a jerk of a player or a manager if you're getting ejected when, replay review just said, no, he's out or he's safe.
Right.
Prior to that, I used to always defend the umpires because people would think that the umpires were the aggressors. And I said, no, come on, it's the exact opposite. I said, when is the last time you saw an umpire call somebody out, say at home plate or first base, and run into the dugout and yell at the manager? It's always him being attacked. I said, umpires are always just reacting to how people are treating them. And I think that's what officiating is all about, and trying to master that. How do you treat people when they come at you this way or that way or that way? And that's the hard part of doing it, whether it be umpiring or in basketball.
35 years as an NBA ref.
Actually, 25 years, Tim.
Oh, is my math wrong? 25 years?
25 years. Your math's wrong. You were probably an English major. That's what it was. No, it's just 1986 to 2011.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. 25 years.
Yeah.
So 25 years, still long time. So many miles run up and down the court every night on the hardwood. How are your knees feeling today?
They feel great when I don't run, obviously. There's no doubt. And that's the main reason why I got out of officiating, because my knees were bad. And my one doctor couldn't believe I was still running in my 25th year up and down the floor, because the year before, I missed just about the whole year because I was just bone on bone in one of my knees. And they thought it was the end of my career. But I luckily got the next year in, my 25th year. But that's the reason why I couldn't run up and down the floor anymore. But since I've retired, I take it easy. I don't run anymore, but I walk, I play golf, stuff like that. And my knees, knock on wood, have treated me okay so far. There's no knee replacements yet, as of yet, but it's still all bone on bone.
I'm surprised we don't see more refs like sprain an ankle, blow an Achilles out, something like that, like have injuries with the amount of moving you guys have in a game. I'm sure you're running like 10 miles a game. It's a lot of moving.
Yeah, I think, you know what, they put It is a lot of movement to tell you the Tim. Yeah, and it's funny when you think about it. The players seem to be staying in that same age from like 20, to 30, and we as referees continue to get older. So
Yeah.
I think it's a credit to the commitment that the officials have to their career of staying in shape, of taking care of their bodies, taking care of everything, and stretching, making sure that little injuries don't turn into big injuries. But you're right. Every once in a while, you'll find someone, their groin or their hamstring but very rarely. You're right. They take care of themselves pretty good.
Your first year in the NBA was 86, 87. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
I think that was Dr. J's last year. So
it was.
As a Philly guy, did you ever get to do a Dr. J game when he's playing for the Sixers in his last year?
I did. I was very fortunate to referee him, not only at home, but I'm sure on the road once or twice too. And people said, "How was he? What did he say? I said, "I don't know. I never said a word. All we did was play basketball. He didn't give you any BS. He didn't care whether you called a foul or not. He just handed you the ball and just played basketball. I didn't even know what his voice sounded like, But no, that's when I talk to people, I say, you know what? I was so fortunate and so blessed in my life that in '86, I said, I refereed in Dr. J's last year and then went through the big era of, Bird and Magic and Michael and, Kobe and LeBron. So I was really blessed to referee at a time in the NBA where it was really just, wow, soaring to different heights.
Who talked the most? If Dr. J talked the least, who talked the most?
Boy, I don't think we have enough time here so I can get on the list of all the players who talked the most. And obviously, as the years went on, it seems to get worse, too.
Yeah, do they talk more today than they did in '86?
I think you see, and as I see from the replay center, more discussions with the referees. And part of it, you know what, Tim, to be honest, part of it's the referee's fault. The reason why they do it is because they can. I was taught by my mentors, hey, if you want to explain something, fine. If the question is asked, that's great. But if someone comes at me with a comment or stuff, you don't have to talk to them. You can just, just go around your way. My old boss, Darryl Garrison, would always tell me regarding, like, say, technical fouls and how much did I take. I would ask him. And he says, Steve, anytime somebody breaks your concentration of what you're doing, you have to address that. If that's with a technical foul, that's fine. If it's with a warning saying, hey, you're going to get a technical foul, if you continue this conversation, that's fine too. But it's true. I mean, as a referee, I know part of the game is diffusing situations, but I think I see as the years have gone on and even the last number of years, just too much, not just complaining, but it's just amazing. I think these players believe they never foul because when I see them now they're telling their coach, go to replay, to challenge it. And you look at the replay and you go, did this guy really believe he didn't smack him across the arm? I mean, what is it? So maybe they live in a different world. I just can't be realistic. But if I were a coach, I would never believe a player. Never believe a player that he said, I didn't foul.
Yeah, we saw like Jalen Brunson with the Mavericks in the playoffs this year. He wanted his team to replay a call that he thought he got hit in the face, and he had his team replay it, and the replay showed he didn't get hit in the face. And you would think the player would know if he got hit in the face or not.
I know. It's almost like, well, maybe the tape will lie and agree with me. That kind of stuff just doesn't happen. Tape doesn't lie. And believe me, as an official, many nights I thought with my calls that I made, I blow the whistle and, someone said, that's not a foul. Oh, yes, it is. And you go back and you go, that's not what I saw in real play. But the tape doesn't lie. And you can't, you know what? You can't win. When you run it back again, I still miss the call.
Yeah, it's the truth. Did you ever tell a player, maybe it was the next time you saw him, like, hey, I missed that one in New York. I missed that one. Or did you ever say that to somebody when you knew you missed a call?
Absolutely, Tim. And I think that's where you build your credibility. What we'd have in our locker room towards the end of my career, the last maybe 10 years or so, we had like computers in our locker room that we could pull up even at halftime. You could pull up certain plays in the game at halftime and look to see, because there's always doubt. Players and coaches are always trying to put doubt in your mind. And I don't know why. Maybe they think that you'll listen to them next time. I don't know. But putting that doubt in your mind, and every referee has that little bit of doubt at certain times with certain calls. And by going into the locker room and seeing the play, and you realize whether you got it called correctly or incorrectly. And even in the second half, there were times, and depending on who the player was, I would approach him and say, hey, Tim, you know what? You're right. You got hit on that one. I didn't see it that way. And then, you know what? A lot of times they appreciate it. And then a lot of times when a player would complain, I'd go in the locker room and I'd see that I was right. Then I'd walk up to him and I'd ask them and go, you watch that play? No, they say. I go, yeah, I was right. You were wrong. I was right. And I will admit when I'm wrong, I'll tell them, but you were wrong this time. You know? So, yeah, no, tape is really good. And I think admitting you miss plays, the players and to certain coaches, I'll explain why certain coaches. I think it builds your credibility because I think it takes that word arrogance out of it. And it takes the fact that you're human, you're going to miss plays, so you say, hey, I'm going to try to get better. There were a couple coaches, I won't name names, but you couldn't tell them that you missed a call. Because I heard both of them say the same thing. One, I told the coach. Number two, I heard the coach talk to my partner, and he said, you're not paid to miss call. You can't tell me you missed that call. Oh. So I put it in the back of my mind. Can't tell that coach anymore I missed the call. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Was it difficult through the years? You're in the league 25 years doing games, and there's a lot of rule changes that happen in 25 years. You know, just the game changed itself. It was played in a different way, but then you also had like the restricted area or the way that you're calling hand checking and all these other things. I got to imagine as an official, that's tough when last year this is a foul or this is not a foul, but this year it is based on the new rule changes. Was it tough to kind of see that in real time?
Yeah, it was. It took some adjustments, especially you mentioned a couple of them. You hit the nail on the head too, Ken. When we took hand checking out of the game, it was difficult because you're used to guys being able to do it, and you would use your judgment whether you felt that hand check, you know, is an advantage or disadvantage to the defensive player. And when we started changing, I still remember like. Sometimes the guy's hand would be on him, and really nothing was happening. And the league would say, you have to call it. They go, wait a second. He didn't apply any pressure. He goes, we have to get this out of the game. So anytime that hand goes on the person, whether you think it affects the person's speed or balance or rhythm, you're calling it. So that was difficult for everybody involved. And the other one that you said, the restricted area. Boy, I mean, it's still, to me, is a difficult play, especially when you have a few things involved with the restricted area, whether it be a secondary defender who can't be in there,
right,
but he can be in there if the guy receives it in the so-called lower defensive box. And it's like primary, secondary, lower defensive box, outside, inside that box. He receives the ball. So many things go through your mind, and your mind can't process everything at once. And that's why a lot of times you need help from your partner. I know when that restricted area first came in, I really struggled with it with regard to the offensive foul because we were never instructed as referees to look at feet.
Right.
You would basically referee the defender and the torso area. So to look at feet, sometimes I would miss the contact or maybe where did he take the contact? So it was definitely an adjustment. But I like some of the rules don't really change itself. Some interpretations, of rules, things like what they're doing now in the NBA with regarding to this abnormal shooting motion of like the offensive players launching themselves in. Well, obviously a year ago you're allowed to do it. Now you can't. It wasn't really a change of a rule. It was more of an interpretation. I like it because, some of the stuff the players were doing to get to the foul line was ridiculous. It really was. But here's how good the players are. After the first couple weeks of the season, you didn't see that too often in a game at all. And it's a credit to how good the players are and how shrewd they are, but they're always trying to find a way to circumvent the rule to their advantage. So something else is going to come up in the next year or so, Tim, that the league will say, can't have that. Let's look at it this way again.
Mm-hmm. Your referee career overlapped almost the entire Michael Jordan era. And I don't know still to this day if we've ever seen, a superstar of that level. Like he was like a pop star. He was a global phenomenon. What was it like to just experience all that Jordan was throughout the 20 years that you saw him?
Yeah, I think as you're asking the question too, Tim, I'm just thinking back and thinking about it, especially like the games in the finals and so on. Some really special moments. I mean, I even refereed his last regular season games. And so that was really special. And what made it special is because you knew that you were looking at great, and you just knew that there was very rarely does someone like that come along in any sport. You got the Wayne Gretzky, you got Michael Jordan, it's just incredible. It really was to referee on that time. Now, that being said, you couldn't get all wound up and like, oh, Michael Jordan. You had to do your job as a referee. I've called technical fouls on Michael, before, never ejected him. He was smart enough not to get ejected. He might have been, but most of the time he was smart enough not to because he knows how valuable he was for his teammates. But I respect him too because how he handled, like me personally, and I think the referee. He was very professional. He would disagree. He's a competitor, obviously, and he would come up to you, but he wouldn't be like players like trying to bring the house down. He wouldn't be running around the court, like, oh my God, I got hit in it. He'd just walk up to you and just say, hey, Jen, you're getting hit. My gosh, didn't you see that? No. I said, I didn't see it that way. Well, come on. And we would talk that way. So it was like not trying to, signal you out and saying you're doing a horrible job and so on and so forth. So I respected his professionalism as well as his ability to play basketball.
So the other part of this that I want to make sure that we get to is the reason I wanted to really bring you on the pod is not only your outstanding career as an official, but you've become a Catholic deacon in recent years. And I think, that's kind of been one of those things that surprises people. And a lot of people, if they're not Catholic, but Christian, they're like, what does that mean? Is he a priest? And, what does that mean to be a deacon? So I grew up Catholic. I'm a practicing Catholic today. And I'm interested in when that calling started for you. Like, was this something that maybe early on you had thought about becoming a priest as a child, or was this something that later in life, as you're diving more into your faith, as your refereeing career is slowing down, it came at that point?
Great question. First of all, like you're saying about like people are surprised. I'm actually going to my 50th high school reunion next week. I can't believe it's 50 years already. So if people can add it up, yes, I'm 67 years old. Can't believe it. Some of my high school classmates still can't believe that I'm an ordained Catholic teacher because they remember me from high school. And some of my college buddies from my baseball team are going, Dad's what? Dad's a deacon in the Catholic Church? Oh my God. So no, it really is amazing, Tim, and God bless you for your faith and praise God for the Holy Spirit of you. It is amazing how God can take whatever he wants and make and mold you into how he wants your life to be. I never envisioned myself in this role as an ordained minister in the Catholic Church. I had a great formation. My parents were Catholic, and they took me to Mass every Sunday, whether I wanted to go or not. They took me to confession every 2 weeks, whether I wanted to go or not.
You probably needed that.
Oh, I didn't think I did, but and then my dad's brother was a priest in the Archdiocese here in Philadelphia for almost 70 years. Wow. And he was like one of my favorite uncles. And I had a lot of aunts and uncles on both sides. Like my dad was one of 12. My mom was one of 8. And my Uncle Tony, man, he was a priest, but he was like the cool guy too because he loved sports. He was a teacher at a high school for a while, an athletic director. He was involved in that. Then he had a parish. He was a pastor at. So he and I were always close. And it's kind of weird, and I'm going to digress a little bit. It's kind of weird that now, as I look back on my life, two of the men who I admired the most, my father and my Uncle Tony, one was a referee and one was a priest. And I look at my life and my calling now and I go, wow, this isn't by coincidence. It's not by coincidence. But to get back to your question about how I came about it, I never knew what a deacon was or did. Growing up, obviously I was formed properly, but I always say this, when I got my independence, my driver's license, I drove right by the church. I never stopped in. Don't ask me why. I guess kids, like they do that. Whether we're in high school or college, we think we don't need God. We think we don't need faith. We think we're indestructible. We think our talents are our own man-made. Obviously that we're going through. And so I really was not a practicing Catholic for a number of years, Tim. Not proudly saying that, obviously. All through college, and even in the start of my in my 20s, going through my career changes and so on, and finally getting into the career of officiating, even to my early 30s. I was not a practicing Catholic. I would go on Christmas and Easter. I had in my mind, the evil one had me convinced. Say, you know what? Going to mass, you don't have to go to mass on Sunday. It's not a sin. Come on, now you're okay. You're a good guy. And I think the evil one's around convinces all of us of that you're not that bad. You know, you're a good person. You know, and it's funny as you're saying that. I'm just thinking of what what the gospel reading was with that at preached this week is that when Jesus commanded us to love like Him, He didn't command us to be just a nice guy. He didn't sit there and say, "Hey, just be a nice guy." No, these commands of Jesus is there. You know, you have to love as I love, and so I think sometimes we don't put enough emphasis on that as a society. But to get back to your question, you can see when I'm getting older, I can go off on tangents, and you'll be giggle. But as you get older, thoughts come and they go. But no, my faith was really I reverted back to my faith because of my wife. My wife, Mary Ellen, of over 30 years. I met her when I was going through the airport in Philadelphia. Obviously, referees travel a lot. I was in the league. My first 5 years in the league, I was single. And so, you know, I wouldn't go home sometimes. I carry golf clubs with me on the road. I play golf, this, that, the other thing. But a lot of traveling, going into the airport. And my wife was a teacher by trade. She was a teacher, but she also worked part-time at the airport because of the airport benefits. She said a couple of her girlfriends told her, "Hey, let's get a part-time job at the airport. We can fly for free in the summertime." It's a wonderful lifestyle. It really is. So I met her that way. And we obviously back then there was no social media. There's no, Instagram, Facebook. I had to find out about this woman that I met who was this beautiful, wonderful woman. And the one thing kept coming back. Every one of them said, "She's really Catholic." And I said, and at the time I'm not practicing, but I'm thinking, well, we have something in common. And she's really Catholic. I'm Catholic per se, and in name only at the time. But dating Mary Ellen, getting to know her, she reverted me back on my faith. I saw a joy in her. I saw a joy in her family, her mom especially, who was an integral part of my faith journey too, that I just sat there and went, I'm missing out on something. I really am. And I've told this story many a times, and it's always in my witness, and I'll tell this story to you too. We went out on our first date. We went to a nice Italian restaurant in South Philly, had a great time. I go home, and during that week now, I'm trying to think, how can I really impress? We all, as guys, we try to impress. How can I impress her that she'll like me more, and so on and so forth? And what can I do? And I call her up, and I know that she had a good time on the date. I said, "Would you like to go out, on this weekend?" She goes, "I'd love to." She goes, "Where would you like to go?" I said, "How about we go to church?" I said, "How about church and brunch afterwards next Sunday?" I figured that's got to get it. Come on. I mean, she's
that's a good move.
Catholic girl, and here I am. Okay, I can sacrifice going to church, right, one time. So we do that. She accepted, and we go to church. And I remember sitting in mass with her, and all I could think about was brunch afterwards. And was so distracted, didn't like at all what the priest had to say in his homily. I'm just sitting there, and I can't wait to get out. And when we finally got out and we're walking to the restaurant is when she really, it kind of affected me what we were talking about. I told her I didn't get anything out of the mass. She was like, "You know what? I got nothing out of that. What, are you kidding me?" And she said, "What did you put into it?" And I looked at her and go, "What do you mean?" I said, "That guy just rambled on and on in a homily for 20 minutes and meant nothing." And she just said, "Well, do you have anybody in your family you'd like to pray for? That maybe you said a few prayers for them, or maybe you could have prayed to the Holy Spirit that something that He said would have touched your heart." And she stopped me in my tracks, Tim. And I sat and I looked at her and I went like, she's right. Everything else we do in life, in our job, school, relationships, you get something out of what you put into it. And I was putting nothing into it. And I think that's what happens today. People just go to church and expect, okay, it's just it's not exciting. It's not this. Well, what's your mindset going into it? Your mindset was praise and worship of gratitude, and mine wasn't. And she stopped me, and I just, from that day on, I started thinking about it more. So I guess I was about my mid-30s at that time, Tim, and started going back to church. On the road, I made sure I didn't miss on Sundays, unless I was obviously traveling and I couldn't get to mass. And by the time we got married, which was, we got engaged 9 months after we met, and married like another 6-7 months after that. So I started starting my relationship with the Lord, which obviously continues because it's such a journey. And I just credit her because I know I would not be in my spiritual journey where I'm at in my spiritual journey without my wife. And I know, and I say this because of anybody listening, faith is so important in your life because life's not easy. And every year we go on, it gets difficult and more difficult and more difficult. And we see what's happening in the world, not just in our country, in the world. And we need to fall back. We need someone in our lives who's going to help us. And the Lord is there for us all. And when I finally realized that, my life, not that the difficulties went away, but I dealt with them. And of course, we're going to have them. And I know one of the most difficult times in my life, I went through a situation with the referees in a tax issue years ago. I went to federal court, 2 weeks in federal court, and I couldn't handle it. And that's when I started, it was over 20 years ago, and I started going to daily mass. And it got me through that most difficult situation where I just surrendered to the Lord and just said, I can't handle it. You have to take this from me. You have to give me the grace to know that whatever happens, it's happening for your reason, and I'll be able to handle it. And He gave me the grace to handle it. I came through it, and I came through it a better person. I wouldn't wish those 2 weeks on anybody. It was the hardest 2 weeks of my life. But when I look back, it was probably the best 2 weeks of my life because the love of my wife and the love of my Lord strengthened incredibly. And I just, you go through situations like that and you have to look at the positive.
When did becoming a deacon creep into the picture? Because that's kind of a big step there. Like, it's one thing to kind of be a lapsed Catholic and to find your faith again. It's another thing to be like, I want to be an ordained deacon within the church, because that's another level of accountability and of sacrifice that you need to put in from the time, the commitment. You're there on Sundays, and it's not just you put on the vestment on Sunday and stand up at the altar. There's a lot more that goes with being a deacon within the church.
Yeah, Tim, that's true. And sometimes I'm still intimidated by it. I'm still intimidated by how the Lord called me to serve Him, unworthy as I am. And also not, you're right, taking that next step. As you were saying, asking that question, I'm going like, yeah, you're right. It is like crazy. And I still, in daily prayer, I talk to Him sometimes, Tim, and I go like, I can't believe You did this to me. But I'm all in. I want to serve You. I want to, but how it got to be that way. Okay, how it got that way. So I did talk to you about my injury, my 24th year in the league. I was injured. All the doctors said, you're done. I went to the best doctors in Philly, in New York. They said, Steve, there's nothing we can do for your knee. Your career is basically over. Well, the one doctor who is the doctor for the Philadelphia 76ers, Jack McPhilmy, he was the Sixers physician for a number of years, orthopedic surgeon. Great friend, great doctor, just a wonderful man. During that 24th year when I'm out just about all year, he said, Steve, guess what? We're just going to take our time here. We're going to give you some injections. We're going to go through physical therapy. And let's just see by next September, when the next year starts, let's see where we are. Let's just not, give up yet. So, in the course of rehabbing during that year that I was out, I remember my wife and I were down the shore during the Easter time. And so we're going to confession. We come back. I'm sitting in the pew. And I say my penance, but also in prayer, talking to the Lord, saying, Lord, I thank You for everything You've blessed me with in my life. But I'd really love to get my 25th year in. It didn't mean anything, Tim, with regard to pension or anything. It was just a nice round number, I thought. And I just told Him, I said, Lord, if You give me my 25th year, I'm all Yours. Whatever You want me to do, I'll do. And so that 24th year, as I'm rehabbing, I start feeling better as the year went on, the summer went on. September comes from now the fall of my 25th year. The league has no idea. They say, how you doing? I go, well, I think I'm going to come to the preseason meetings. I think I'm feeling pretty good. I've been testing the knee out. And lo and behold, I get into my 25th year pretty good. And I can still remember, Tim, some doctors writing me notes, literally, as I got in the mail going, I can't believe I'm seeing you on TV now. You should not be refereeing with that knee you have. The Lord gave me my 25th year. So after that, the 25th year, of course, now I got to repay my end of the bargain, right? And I can remember as a kid making bargains with the Lord and not keeping my end. But I retired in June of 2011, and I knew it was going because like the last month of the playoffs, my knee really started bothering. So I knew this is it. I'm not going to get any more than this last year out of it. So after retiring in the middle of June of 2011, and prayer, I just say, Lord, just, show me the way. Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? I have no idea. And about 6 months later, Jeff Cavins, a world-renowned Catholic speaker, came to our parish. Matter of fact, I just had a retreat with Jeff here in Philadelphia this past fall, and I told him he didn't know the story about how this story I'm about to tell you. So Jeff Cavins is presenting to us at our parish, and he's speaking to this group, and he's saying about how God talks to you. Now, I've been waiting for God to talk to me for 6 months to let me know what he's doing, so I'm looking at him going like, he might be talking to you, but he's not talking to me. So he gave a couple of examples of how God talks to you. I won't get into that. And so as he was talking about how God talks to you, I was sitting there thinking, all of a sudden the word deacon came to my mind. And I couldn't believe, I go, wait a second. Now, I really didn't know what a deacon did. I know we had two at our parish who were good guys. I couldn't tell you what they did. Yeah, I know they were at Mass. They did a couple things. But I couldn't get the word deacon out of my mind. So back home that night with my wife, and I told her the story. And she goes, well, you better go, see our pastor. And Monsignor Picard, my dear friend, I went in and I told him. He kind of giggled. And I said, I don't know what's going on here. But I told him the story. He goes, hey, Steve, you know what? You never know. God calls you in different ways. If this is the way he's calling you, that's fine. But when I tell people what he told me, and he starts laughing. He goes, Steve, that wasn't too profound. But it was really pretty practical and simple. He said, look, if you feel you're being called in this way, just put one foot in front of the other. Don't think too far ahead. And you know what? If this is where he's calling you, he'll lead you that way. If not, he'll stop you and he'll direct you in another direction. Well, 7 years later, after formation in the seminary, here I'm walking down the aisle of the cathedral in Philadelphia, ready to be ordained a deacon. And so it's been an incredible journey, Tim. I loved my basketball career immensely. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if I had to do it over again, I'd want to be a referee. I really would. But I always knew there was something missing. There was something that was not totally fulfilling to me. I remember even my first couple times I was injured before that 21st year. It makes you think about, is this all there is in life? And I said, there's got to be more to life than blowing whistles on basketball players. What does that say in life? Okay, just because it's on TV, people think it's a big deal. Yeah, okay, it's a big deal, but I just knew that I was not doing what the Lord wanted me to do. And he's now directed me in this way. And I can't do it without his grace and without his help, because it's intimidating, Tim. To stand up there, I can talk to you right now about refereeing, about sports. When you talk about people's eternal souls and you talk about the gospel and trying to break it open to them, trying to say, how does that relate to you today, right now, sitting in that pew? And that's what I try to do. Because I remember when I sat in that pew, I wanted someone to tell me that. It's intimidating, and I can't do it. I know I can't do it. And that's why every time I'm writing a homily, I just pray, and say, Lord, send your spirit, because I sure can't do this. And you're the one that called me to do this. And so I need you for this. And you know what, Tim? He's never failed. He's never failed. When we put our trust in him and the Holy Spirit, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that part of it. And you're right. Like, I think a lot of people think the intimidating part would be standing in front of a church full of people and speaking. And that's really, I mean, it sounds intimidating, but that's not the intimidating part. The intimidating part is actually being a clergyman of the Catholic Church and carrying the weight that comes with that and feeling unworthy as you're supposed to be at the pulpit speaking, right? Because, I think that's a common misconception, is that, priests, deacons, bishops, cardinals, every member of the church, we're all sinners, right? We're all sinners, and none of us are actually worthy of these titles or these roles. We're only doing what God is asking us to do.
Amen. You're right. The church is made up of sinners, but you know what? With his grace, we get through it. And it's my favorite time of year, because Easter time is the Acts of the Apostles. It's my favorite book. I mean, here are these men, these unworthy, sinful men, and so on and so forth. And I was just saying to my pastor Saturday, we went down for the ordinations of the transitional deacons in Philadelphia. And I said, I was thinking in prayer today, and I'm just thinking about the Apostle Paul and all the other apostles who witnessed the risen Christ. And all we read is scripture. We read that they were teaching in the synagogue, and we're teaching here, teaching people here. I can only imagine, I said, for them to witness the risen Christ, the person they were with for 3 years, and the zeal that they had to have to preach the truth of the risen Christ and his promise, it had to be incredible. And the people had to look there and say, this guy's telling the truth. They saw this guy rise from the dead. They saw him when he was dead and he rose from the dead. And I'm telling you, that's got to be just incredible. And because I think of 12 guys, ordinary guys that God chose. And here we are 2,000 years later, from all the sinful human beings who've tried to destroy the church from within. Forget about from without. From within, we've tried to destroy ourselves. And the Holy Spirit says, I got you. I got you. You know, so it's really incredible. It really is.
Have you ever met the Pope?
No, but I got a great story for you though. John Paul II. Okay, obviously I'm a Polish nationality. My parents are first generation Polish Americans. My grandparents obviously came from Poland, and I still remember when John Paul II was elected Pope. My mom cried. She cried. You know, and it's like, it was incredible. Well, my uncle, who was the priest here in Philadelphia, when John Paul II was Cardinal Wojtyła, came to Philadelphia and stayed with my uncle at his parish during the Eucharistic Congress. Being a Polish, my uncle was in a Polish parish in Philadelphia, like the largest one. He stayed with my uncle when he was a cardinal. When he was elected Pope, he came to Philadelphia for a visit. My uncle was pretty well, I guess you could say, involved with the archdiocese, where he was on committees and so on when dignitaries would come in. So he was always there when the Pope was there, or the Cardinal, the Eucharistic Congress. So when he came back as Pope, my uncle was running the Eucharistic Congress, helping out. And there's a picture we have of the Pope standing next to my uncle, and there's the two looks on their faces was quite amazing. I said, Uncle Tony, what's going on in this picture? He said, Steve, the Pope looked at me and says, Tony, can you believe I'm Pope? And he says, I sure can't. And he said, the guy was such a humble man, just a regular, ordinary guy like me and you. Obviously, yes, sinful man. How about this? He went to confession 3 or 4 times a week.
Wow.
This is Pope Saint John Paul II. And we sit there, and I sit there and go, well, I haven't gone for a month or two. And my spiritual director, even if I said, oh, you know, I went last week, he goes, so you haven't sinned this week? And I went, oh, you got me. Okay. But I mean, it's just the humility of the saints, the humility of John Paul. But I thought that story is great, that my uncle knew this saint and walked with this saint. The saint stayed in his parish.
Wow.
Just incredible. Yeah, I know.
That's great. Well, Steve, thank you so much for taking the time for us today. I probably overstayed my welcome here, but I really just love your passion and your zeal for your Catholic faith and, you know, the NBA as well. So thank you so much for coming on the pod to share your story.
Tim, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate sharing my story. And anytime, you got my number. Anytime I can help you out, I can do anything for you, Tim. Just bring me up here, brother. I'm here for you.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with Steve Javie. And if you're wondering what type of baseball player Steve Javie was, I found his stats on Baseball Reference. So Steve Javie, 1976, he was 21 years old. He played for Pulaski in the Appalachian Rookie League. He was 1-5 on the mound with a 4.25 ERA. Started 7 games on the mound before he blew his arm out. Had 2 complete games. A total of 36 innings pitched, gave up 34 hits, 17 earned runs in those 36 innings, gave up 2 bombs, walked 15, struck out 38 in 36 innings. So not terrible numbers, right? Even though that win-loss record isn't all that good. He did have a decent strikeout rate, more than a strikeout per inning. So it sounds like, Steve Javie was a pretty good ball player before he, first became a baseball umpire, then a CBA official, and then ultimately an NBA official, which he is known mostly as. Thank you for listening to today's episode, guys. Special thanks to the Moonlight Graham Show team, the trusted co-host Tommy Griffin, who also does all of the write-ups for our episodes. My brothers Neil and Andy, Brendan Gargano, who does all of our artwork, and of course the great producer Brian Sandvig. They do awesome work. And thank you guys, the Moonlighters out there, the listeners. We could not do this without your support. We really appreciate it. Subscribe to our show wherever you can. Leave us a 5-star review. And have a great week, Moonlighters.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah! It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.